Inside the Western, why these five-star director duos redefined the genre. Inside the Western, why these five-star director duos redefined the genre. We often think of the Western as a genre of the lone hero, one man, one horse, and 1,000 miles of horizon. But behind every iconic gunfighter was a guiding hand in the director's chair. These weren't just business deals. They were artistic marriages that changed the face of cinema forever. Today, we're looking at the 5 creative partnerships that didn't just make movies. They redefined the soul of the American West. And we're starting with the duo that turned a beloved Hollywood icon into a man driven by a dangerous internal fire. Duo 1, Anthony Mann and James Stewart. Before 1950, James Stewart was America's sweetheart, the idealistic hero of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. But then he met Anthony Mann. Over the course of 8 films, they dismantled that "oh shucks" persona and replaced it with something sweating, desperate, and often terrifyingly vengeful. From the mountain peaks of the Naked Spur to the legendary rifle in Winchester 73, Stewart wasn't playing a hero anymore. He was playing a man on the edge of a breakdown. Mann used Stewart's natural likability to make his sudden bursts of rage feel more shocking. They moved the Western from the open plains into the dark corners of the human mind, proving that the most intense standoffs weren't always in the street. Sometimes they were inside the hero's own conscience. Subscribe. But while Mann and Stewart were pushing the genre into the shadows of psychology, another duo was taking a completely different path, one that traded internal turmoil for a lean, stripped-back minimalism that felt as sharp as a razor. To understand how the Western became truly cool before the Italians ever arrived, we have to look at the clinical precision of our second duo. Duo 2, Bud Boetticher and Randolph Scott. In the late 1950s, Bud Boetticher and Randolph Scott created what we now call the renowned Westerns. While other studios were making massive, expensive epics, these two went the other way, lean, mean, and with zero fat. Randolph Scott played heroes who didn't need to explain their motives. They were men of action who spoke in short sentences and moved with a weathered, stoic grace. Boetticher understood that Scott's face told a story better than a page of dialogue. These films were clinical. They proved that the Western didn't need a cast of thousands, just one man, one horse, and a code of ethics that refused to break, even when the desert was trying to swallow him whole. Duo 3, John Ford and John Wayne. You simply cannot talk about Western duos without the kings. John Ford gave Wayne the cinematic frame, and Wayne gave Ford the soul. Their journey together wasn't just a series of movies, it was the history of the genre itself. We see them move from the youthful, wide-eyed optimism of Stagecoach, all the way to the dark, obsessive, and tragic hunt for Ethan Edwards in The Searchers. Their journey tracks the evolution of the American myth. They showed that the West wasn't just a place of adventure. It was a tragedy that could harden even the strongest heart, turning the hero into an outcast, who eventually finds himself standing outside the doorway, looking in. Duo 4, Sergio Leone and Clint Eastwood. By the 1960s, the American Western was stalling, until a cigar-chomping stranger arrived from Italy. Sergio Leone recognized that Clint Eastwood's greatest strength was his restraint. He had the ability to tell an entire story with just a squint. Together, they replaced long speeches with operatic stares, and quick-draw action with unbearable anticipation. As we explored in our evolution of the gunfighter, Leone and Eastwood turned the gunfighter from a man into a mythic force of nature. They moved the genre away from history and toward legend, where the hero doesn't have a name, only a reputation. Duo 5, Delmer Daves and Glenn Ford, The Humanist Grit. While Anthony Mann was exploring psychology, the duo of Delmer Daves and Glenn Ford was grounding the Western in a new kind of gritty realism across 3 essential films, most notably 3:10 to Yuma and Jubal. They moved away from the superhero cowboy. Glenn Ford didn't play a myth. He played a man who was often tired, conflicted, and just trying to do the right thing in a world that made it nearly impossible. Daves was a director who respected the land and the people, and in Ford he found the perfect everyman. Their collaboration was pivotal because it introduced a moral complexity where the villain was often as charming as the hero. This duo proved that tension doesn't always come from a gun. It comes from the sweat on a man's brow as he waits for a train.
To get himself in trouble, man's
Duo 6, Henry Hathaway and John Wayne, The Rugged Evolution. John Wayne had many directors, but Henry Hathaway was the one who helped him transition into the elder statesman of the West, starting in the early 40s with The Shepherd of the Hills, and culminating decades later with Wayne's Oscar-winning turn in True Grit. Hathaway knew exactly how to capture the Duke's rugged, uncompromising spirit. Hathaway's style was no-nonsense and sturdy, matching Wayne's own screen presence. While Ford made Wayne a myth, Hathaway made him a legend you could actually grab a drink with. Their partnership celebrated the rough-and-tumble side of the frontier, focusing on the grit and humour that kept the genre alive for mainstream audiences as it began to age. Duo 7, John Sturges and Burt Lancaster, The Widescreen Professionals. If you want to see the Western at its most professional and high stakes, you look at John Sturges and Burt Lancaster together in films like Gunfight at the OK Corral.
Well, she's been asking me for a year to quit marshalling. You know how women are. All right, now let's get down to business. Now, Morgan and Jimmy know the setup here. Now, Wyatt, you know Ike Clatney has a ranch outside city limits.
Yes, I know.
And the Hallelujah Trail. They specialized in the greatest hits of Western lore. Lancaster brought a physical athleticism and a booming authority that Sturges captured in sweeping widescreen glory. Sturges was a master at the ensemble and the ticking clock narrative. By pairing him with Lancaster, the Western became a spectacle of competence. They didn't just show gunfights, they showed the strategy and the heavy burden of being a professional lawman, setting the stage for the high-octane action westerns of the 60s.
Draw, all of you. But you get it.
Duo 8, Raoul Walsh and Joel McCrea, The Frontier Traditionalists. For those who love the classic, reliable heart of the genre, the partnership between Raoul Walsh and Joel McCrea is essential. In films like Colorado Territory, they kept the spirit of the traditional Western alive. McCrea was the ultimate dependable hero, honest, sturdy, and possessing a quiet dignity that was perfectly framed by Walsh's energetic, fast-paced directing style. This duo represents the golden mean of the genre. They weren't trying to deconstruct the Western, they were trying to perfect it. Their work is a masterclass in pacing and clear-eyed storytelling. reminding viewers why we fell in love with the frontier in the first place, for its sense of adventure and its clear moral compass.
Done himself out of 50,000.
Duo 9, Sergio Solima and Thomas Milian, the operatic cynics. Let's have a look across the Atlantic to the most politically charged duo in the spaghetti western era, Sergio Solima and Thomas Milian, across their Cuchillo trilogy, starting with The Big Gun Down. They took the genre into radical new territory. Milian played the peasant hero, sly, dirty, and incredibly dangerous, while Solima turned the desert into a stage for a revolutionary struggle. This duo offered a cynical, high-energy alternative to the American traditionalists. They used the Western as a mirror for the 1960s social upheaval. This duo is the perfect bridge between the cool of Leone and the blood of Peckinpah, showing that the West was big enough for everyone's revolution. Duo 10, Sam Peckinpah and William Holden. Finally, we come to the end of the trail. Sam Peckinpah and William Holden gave us the Sunset Western. In The Wild Bunch, they showed us the end of the frontier, not with a whimper, but with a visceral, slow-motion explosion of violence. William Holden, once the golden boy of Hollywood, now played a man who knew his time had passed. This duo represented the death of the Old West. By using a classic star like Holden, Peckinpah was signaling that the romanticized era was being replaced by a more violent, mechanized world. It was the final, bloody deconstruction of the hero, a man who refused to go out without a fight.
The channel for westerns and more.
If you enjoyed this video, turn on notifications so you don't miss my next ones. Check out my channel and Facebook page. Links are in the description below. If you got any value from this, please comment, like, share, and subscribe. It really helps. I appreciate it. I'm Wrangler. Bye for now, and I'll see you again soon.